Good morning, friends. Good morning, church. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. Hello, everyone. It's me, Pastor Brian. I'm the pastor here at Christ United Methodist Church in Waynesboro, and it is a bright and sunny, warm, sticky June day. A little early, actually, for this kind of humidity, I would think, but oh well. It is Monday, June 21st at 9 a.m. Good to see you this morning. Hello, hello, hello. This is another episode of PB Reads the Bible, and it is day 29 on our journey through the book of Genesis. So today we'll be looking at chapter 41. There are 50 chapters in the book of Exodus, and so that means we have 10, exactly 10 chapters left to go through the book. So regardless of how short or long the chapters are, I made a decision. I'm going to read one chapter a day, which will give us 2 full weeks. Monday through Friday, 2 full weeks, which will give me at least 2 full weeks to decide what we're going to do next. If we're well, first of all, are we going to continue? Do you? So let me know, folks. Do you want me to continue? You want me to do something? And is there a particular book you want me to take a look at? I'm actually kind of thinking about taking a look at doing a journey through the book of Romans. It's a very powerful book with very, very strong theology, and it's a place where we get a good understanding of Christ based on Paul's writings in Romans. It's a dense book. It's a dense book. So we may not get through a chapter a day on that. We might need to break the chapters down a little bit in order to get through that one. So let me know if that sounds good. If there's a different book of the Bible you want me to look at, I would ask you to not say Revelation, because Revelation would be very difficult to try to communicate properly via this system. That's one. I mean, I can look at it and think about it, but I think that's one that would almost need to be done in person with lots of visual aids to help explain things. Anyway, so think about that. So we've got 2 weeks to decide what we're going to do there. Now I can see some folks are watching, and I can see a couple checking in. Great, great. Keep doing that. Let me know you're there. Say hello to me. Say hello to each other. Good morning, Marcia, and good morning, Cheryl. Good to have you with us today. I got a text from Cindy that she said John and I won't be able to watch you this morning. We'll catch up this afternoon or later. I think she said later. It's I'm humbled that you folks take time out of your lives to watch this, and I'm completely blown away that you let me know that I can't watch it now, but I am going to watch you later. That's cool. Hi, Joe. Good to have you. Good to see you this morning as well. Uh, so we are going to we're going to look at chapter 41. We're going to look at chapter 41. Oh, and I did say we got 2 full weeks of reading. That means Monday through Friday. And other than Fridays, which I will pre-record and have uploaded for you and ready to go for 9 a.m., we'll be able to be live every day. I don't have anything going on in the mornings, and no meetings that I have to get to at like 8 or 8:30 in the morning. Nothing that's going to interfere, at least at this time. I say that in advance, right? At least at this time. All right, so we're going to look at chapter 41. When last we left Joseph on how the sheep bleats, we're he was in prison, and the two officials from the Pharaoh's court, the cupbearer and the chief baker, were both thrown in prison with him. And he interpreted their dreams, one with a good result, one with a bad result, but both came true as Joseph had related them to them, and said, please, when the Pharaoh restores you to your place, remember me. Remember me. I've done nothing wrong, and I've been here. Mention me to Pharaoh, that I was good, right? So that's where things left. But the cupbearer forgot about him. And so Joseph is still in prison. So chapter 41 picks up from there. 2 full years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw 7 more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy, fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. Pause. I'm going to pause just to, although, because Joseph doesn't say it in his explanation. The Nile, the river, is a source of life for the people in Egypt. If you went through Exodus with me, maybe you remember that. Maybe not. No big deal. That's why I'm telling you again now. The Nile River is a source of life for Egypt. So that adds a little extra layer to these cows coming up out of the river. So it's seven fat years of life and 7 scrawny years coming up out of this source of life. Continuing, but he fell asleep again and had a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but they were shriveled and withered by the east wind. And these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams, so he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. Pause. Interpretation of dreams. This idea comes up multiple times in Scripture. Actually, we've got stories in some of the prophets with one of the prophets interpreting dreams. Joseph has already interpreted dreams. He's had dreams that he shared. Also shows up in the book of Daniel with dreams and an interpretation thereof. We can even look at Peter's vision of something like a sheet being lowered down from the book of Acts, something like a sheet being lowered down as a type of dream in which and that needed to be interpreted, and he was able to interpret it himself given a little time and prompting from God. Okay, so it's not unusual for the Pharaoh to call his magicians, his wise men, his magi, to interpret the dream. That's one of their jobs. They should be able to do it. They should be able to do it. So the fact that they're not tells us something. Tells us something about the dreams, and it's setting something up. Just like in Exodus, there were times when Pharaoh's magicians were able to do the same type of signs, same types of what we would call miracles or plagues, as Moses was able to do, well, that God was doing through Moses. We saw that the first several, the magicians were able to do them as well. But things changed once it got to a point where the magicians no longer could. And so that tells us something then, and it tells us something here. It tells us something about these dreams. They're important. They're very important, and they're definitely. The author is pointing out that these dreams are from God, and that God is hiding the explanation, the interpretation from these other magicians for a purpose, and we'll find out what that purpose is. And keep in mind, that's their explanation for everything that they couldn't understand. It's God. So continuing from verse 9. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. "Today I have been reminded of my failure," he told Pharaoh. "Some time ago you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night The chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant. And everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Pause, because you don't go before Pharaoh in slave clothes and not having washed or bathed or shaved in a couple of years. No, it doesn't happen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. So you, on Joseph. It is beyond my power to do this, Joseph replied, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. Pause. So once again, we're seeing here this drastic change in Joseph, right? A few years ago, he was pretty egotistical, and he probably would have said to Pharaoh, "Sure, I could do it. I could do just about anything." But we see humility. We're seeing humility in him in this piece here. Just kind of like in this image behind me, this picture behind me, Joseph kneeling before Pharaoh. Right? His dream early on was that everyone was going to be kneeling down to him, but here he's being humble and he's kneeling before Pharaoh, and he says, "I can't do it, but God can. God can." So he's actually, like I said, he's being humble. He's being humble. Continuing, verse 17. So Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. In my dream, he said, I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. But then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them. I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all the land of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows. But afterward, you wouldn't have known it, for they were still as thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted, shriveled, and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed up the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean. And Joseph responded, both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt, but afterward there will be 7 years of famine, so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God and he will soon make them happen. Pause. Excuse me one moment. Okay, back. Remember what I said about numbers. Numbers are symbolic in scripture. Most often, anyway, numbers are symbolic. Especially when you see certain numbers, you can almost guarantee that they're symbolic. 7 is one of those numbers, right? 7 is a number of completion. So complete sets of years. You will have a complete period of time where things are going to be great. You will have a complete period of time where there will be a great famine. We shouldn't read it literally as 7 years of both, but rather that it's a complete period of time of prosperity and a complete period of time of famine. Right? So that Joseph has interpreted the dreams for Pharaoh and said, this is what's going to happen. God has decreed it. And since you got it twice, guaranteed it's going to happen. So, in addition to interpreting the dreams, Joseph's going to be bold and go a little bit further and give advice. Now, remember, this is the kid that was so dumb, he's like wandering around, looking at the ground, trying to find his brothers. But now all of a sudden, he's smart, and he's willing to offer advice. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses. Store it away and guard it so there will be food in the cities. That way, there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, this famine will destroy the land. Pause. He got smart. Joseph got smart. And he's giving some good advice to Pharaoh. So he's smarter than he was. He's humbler than he was. And he seems in so many ways to have grown through his difficulties. We might say, in spite of his difficulties, he has grown, and his faith in God has developed as well. So continuing, Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than you. Pause. So remember, none of the magicians, none of Pharaoh's smart people could interpret the dreams and could tell Pharaoh what they meant. So since they are supposed to be the most intelligent, wisest people in the land, and they couldn't do it, and Joseph could, then Pharaoh's reasoning, you must be the most intelligent and wisest person in the land because you're the only one that could understand what was going on here. Therefore, therefore, I am putting you in charge. I'm putting you in charge. That's quite a change from slave. He was slave just a couple hours ago. Or I'm sorry, not slave, prisoner. He was a prisoner just a couple hours ago, and slave at the same time. Hebrew. He was the Hebrew. And now he's being second in the land. second only to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. Pause. That's power. The signet ring is power. This means, boom, I dip it in wax, seal it. It's official. It's official. So he can do it without going into anywhere for approval. That's what that's saying too. He dressed him in fine linen clothing, sign of wealth, and hung a gold chain around his neck, sign of position. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval. Pause. Wow, right? Significant turnaround. And notice that little line there, wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. Just like Joseph's dream when he was a kid, with his, of course, then it was his brothers, kneeling down, but everyone is going to be kneeling down before him. Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath Paneah, which probably means God speaks and lives. God speaks and lives. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt, and Pharaoh's, I missed where I was. We'll read verse 45 again. Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath Paneah. He also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. Might be Heliopolis in yours. It's a city, an important city in Egypt. We think anyway. On maybe the same place, maybe two different places. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. Pause. Number 30. So he was 30 years old. What's the big deal, right? Well, again, number is symbolic. He may not have actually been 30 years old, but the author is saying he was 30. Why? Because when you get into the books of the law, it is a person is 30. When a person is 30 is when they are an official priest and religious leader for the communities and stuff like that. So he's actually giving Joseph some priestly responsibilities and duties, and this is the kind of thing that he is. Okay, which is why when we get into the Gospels, they identify Jesus as being 30 when he started his ministry. That's to connect back to the proper age, according to the laws, to be a priest. To be a priest. So he's giving Joseph, he's basically saying Joseph is a priest. Pharaoh is making him pretty much a ruler over all this stuff, but the author is assigning him a priesthood, is assigning him priesthood as a person who speaks with God, basically. Okay. And he inspected the entire land of Egypt. So good thing to do. He doesn't want to just jump in and start doing things. Let's go check things out, see where the land is, and see what kind of storage facilities we have and where they are, and maybe we need to build some new ones, and how things are going. As predicted, for 7 years, the land produced bumper crops. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain like sand on the seashore. Finally, he stopped keeping records because there was too much to measure. During this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, or Heliopolis. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family, because Manasseh sounds like a Hebrew word meaning causing to forget. Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief, because it means fruitful, or sounds like the word that means fruitful. At last, the 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries. But throughout Egypt, there was plenty of food. Eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians. For the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt, and people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. End of chapter 41. So now in this part here anyway, so the famine, start from there, right? The years of prosperity, the complete period of prosperity has ended, and now the complete period of famine has begun. And at first, people are able to get by with what they had stored up, but it's become so bad, especially in the surrounding countries. Egypt sounds like Egypt is the last of the ones to really get hit the hardest, based on how the author puts it. But it has reached a point where they need to start digging into what's been stored up. And in this part, it sounds like the Egyptians can have their food for free. All right, it doesn't say. It says that he opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was so bad in Egypt. However, he's charging people from other countries. He's charging for people from other countries. So Joseph, either for himself or for Egypt, or both, is profiting off of the famine. We'll find out what happens next, right? What happens next? How do things go? Do they get better or worse? Etc. etc. Tune in tomorrow for another episode of As the Sheep Bleats. I like that, Cheryl. I still like that. Now, tune in tomorrow for another episode of BB Reads the Bible, our journey through the book of Genesis. Tomorrow will be episode 30, and we will be looking at chapter 42 tomorrow as the famine continues. Well, friends, I do pray that this has been beneficial to you. I thank you for your time. I pray that God has spoken to you through something I've said, through something we've read together. Maybe you've learned something. Maybe you've relearned something that you knew as a child and forgot. All that's great. As you go about your day today and every day, be beguiled by the beauty all around us. When you see things, take pictures and videos and send them to me, and see what God is doing in your life. And when you recognize it, say thank you, God, and then tell people about it, including me. Right? Be blessed, my friends.